What are the tools in our toolbox that have allowed us to experience the good times, that have allowed us to gain the wins? And by looking at these patterns, we have a better chance at repeating them because we're conscious and aware of what we're doing that's leading to the big wins. Hello and welcome to the Unlock Lab. I'm your host, Tosca DiMatteo. This is episode number 51, and I'm here to talk to you today about a very important process to review your successes, whether it's one particular success or maybe a phase of your life where you're feeling like things are working out. We're going to talk about it and why it's so important. Before I dive in, though, if you're new to the podcast, welcome. I'm so glad you are here and you found this podcast. I'm Tosca DiMatteo, the founder of Tosca Coaching and Consulting, and I do the work to help you at the intersection of personal growth and professional breakthroughs. Another way to think about what I do is I help you get unstuck in your job or your career. If you want to learn more about what I do, my speaking, my one-on-one coaching, you can visit CoachTosca.com. That's Coach Tosca.com. All right, so I'm actually really excited to talk to you about this today. It was really sparked by a conversation I had with a client this week. I get on the call with this client and I'm like, so what do you want to talk about today? And she's like, well, I don't really know because things are going well. There wasn't anything that kind of came up that was like, big trigger, big tension point. And so what we did is we actually spent our session talking about what went well and doing the investigation of feeling successful and feeling like things have been accomplished over the past several weeks for her in her job. The reason why I want to talk to you about this today is because we can spend so much time when things aren't working out and when we're not getting to where we want to go and when we're feeling stuck. We can spend so much time analyzing the muck and the sad feelings, the tough times, the why did this happen? What did I do? We can spend so much time beating ourselves up. And we have got to take the time to look at what is part of the success of our life. What are the tools in our toolbox that have allowed us to experience the good times, that have allowed us to gain the wins? And by looking at these patterns, we have a better chance at repeating them because we're conscious and aware of what we're doing that's leading to the big wins. You're picking up what I'm putting down here. We want to look at what's going wrong so we can fix it, but we don't want to take the time to say, well, what's going right so we can repeat it, right? It's a little bit messed up, and it's because our inner critics make us feel bad. And so we want to spend time on fixing that as opposed to honoring and celebrating what's working and looking at what's led to that. So one of the things that we did was not just look at what was going on in the work environment, but also what was going on in her personal life that was contributing to everything. Because we can easily forget that, oh, by the way, we're not compartmentalized human beings. And so, for example, she realized, oh, I'm actually really focused on eating well and getting movement and exercising. And I'm focused on, having a good relationship with my partner and all of these things that was contributing to how she was showing up at work. And then in the work environment, part of what we were investigating was what was going on that worked well and what was your part in it. So we can easily, for example, say, oh my gosh, I won this client, right? And we can kind of externally attribute that. Oh, they finally said yes, or oh, they were on board, or somebody else did something to make it a win, as opposed to look at ourselves and say, well, how was I showing up differently in that client interaction where it ended up being a yes? Or what was the journey that I was on, for example, in getting that client on board? And when we started to explore what was leading to this phase and period of success was that it had actually been a longer journey than these past few weeks, right? That actually she started attributing, well, I was consistent and I was persistent in my work and I wasn't taking no as a reason to not continue to build relationships, that she was continuing to reach out and add value and build a relationship, even though she did hear no's. And those no's ended up turning into yeses because she was building a relationship and she was playing the long game of her job, of her career, of what she was there to do. As a side note, if this idea of building strong relationships is of interest to you, I highly recommend you go back and listen to my 3-part series on how to build strong relationships. Because in this evaluation of how this success came to be, it was because she was looking at the long game of building relationships and not just the short term, and not taking things personally and continuing to add value. That's just a sidebar. I personally thought that series was super helpful. I hope it is for you too. One of the things that I cannot overstate when it comes to really looking at the factors that contribute to our seasons of winning or our moments of successes is really looking at what has shifted in the energy of how you're showing up in whatever the situation was. And in this conversation with my client, that was also a part of the conversation that we had, where in one situation, she was highly triggered and she came back to this same person a few days or weeks later and was showing up with a different mentality, with a different intent, even though she didn't really realize. And when she started to look at how that interaction was different than in the past, she could start to accept, oh, yeah, I guess I did show up differently. And that was a contributing factor to how they responded to her. You see, we can often, again, point at the external and say, oh, well, they showed up differently. And so it was a different situation. But if we look at ourselves, we can often find that part of what made the situation different was that we were different when we were showing up. So whether that's how you're showing up in a relationship with a colleague at work, with a boss, a friend, or a spouse, or a significant other, that other people receive us differently when we have done the work of understanding maybe what was pissing us off or why we were triggered, or taking the time to look at the truth of the situation so that we can show up and not bring all the baggage to the table. And these are the kinds of wins that we often, first of all, don't recognize within ourselves, but they also don't get recognized externally. We don't get the pat on the back from the friend or from the colleague that says, you know what? I just felt you were energetically different. You must have been doing your work. You must have been journaling. You must have been working through your feelings. Like, we don't hear that kind of feedback. And so that's why I'm saying, like, we have to stop and say, what has contributed to our success or our season of winning that we may be feeling? Because once we understand it, we can start to repeat it and we can start to say, well, what was the scaffolding in our life that enabled us to have those wins? Last episode, I talked about how I decided to get out of my own way and put my hat in the ring for a storytelling competition. And part of, if I want to take a look and say, well, what contributed to me actually becoming a finalist for that? Then I have to look at not just that moment that I decided to put my hat in the ring, but the months before of all the work I've been doing on myself to get out of my own way, all the practicing of journaling, all of the positive self-talk, all of the honoring what I needed and giving myself permission to go get those things, whether it was I got to go to the gym because I got to move my body, or I need to take a vacation for myself, or I need to hold a boundary so that I'm conserving my energy and focusing on what I actually care about versus self-sabotaging and giving my energy away. You know, I have to look at not just that moment in time where I made a new decision and it worked out, but like what has been leading up to that moment, because that all is contributing factors. And by looking at those pieces, it accomplishes not just how do I repeat these patterns, but it also helps to keep our inner critics at bay. Because what we're doing is we're giving ourselves proof of the truth. You know what I'm saying? We're saying, oh, These things do matter. Me taking the time to journal actually is not a waste of time. If your inner critic is telling you, oh my gosh, what's the point of journaling? It's a waste of time. You should go create something or produce something or do something effective. But if we can look at these things that maybe that our inner critic gets in the way of, we can then remember the truth of these things so that our inner critic stays quiet or goes away all completely because we are very firm in what works for us and what we need to do. I'm hoping this makes sense to you. Reviewing your success is about giving time and space to the good in your life, to the wins in your life. And even if you're not in that season, even if in this moment you're like, well, I'm kind of in a dumpy place, then you can use this moment to say, when things were going well, or when I think about something I was really proud of in my life, what was I doing? What was going on? And you can use that to remind yourself of the tools in your toolbox that you know work for you. It's funny, just yesterday, I took a salt bath in my tub for the first time in a very long time. It reminded me, oh, I have this tool in my toolbox for taking space, for clearing my energy, for coming back to myself and ignoring the external world. And it just reminded me, right, this is one of those practices that I can bring back into my life to help me with grounding, to help me with showing up in the best possible way that I can. And so I offer that to you. If you're kind of in the dumps, think about when things are working for you, when you feel like there's a little bit of magic in your life. What are the things that you're doing, or what are the things that are happening? Maybe you think about the fact that, oh, wow, I actually had a really great group of people around me. I had support team. I reached out to friends. Maybe it was, man, when I think about it, usually the summer is a great period for me because I'm very happy in the sunshine. And so maybe you start to think, oh, maybe I need to give myself these things more often because they're kind of part of what works for me. We all have these ahas in our life that we can unlock when we pay attention to them. But if we're just moving through life and we're not stopping and saying what's working when it is working, we're missing a huge opportunity. So I don't want to sit here and beat a dead horse, but I hope you've gotten some tools in your toolbox to be able to do that review of, wow, how did I happen to get that promotion? Or how did I happen to get that client win? Or how did I end up getting a new job when I was feeling stuck and miserable? And you can lean on those things as proof points and as truth for what might work for you again. Or you can look at those things and say, well, that worked for me then, but I'm a different person. So I'm actually going to try something else that I think might work better for me now. We can use it in that way too. And if you need any more support or help on helping you extract this knowledge about your wins, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to support you and find those threads. You can find my information in the show notes. You know me, I'm easy to get a hold of. All right, well, I hope that you enjoyed this conversation. I'm so glad that you're here, and I'm celebrating your successes, your past, current, and future successes with you today. I know there's so much more that's available to you, and I can't wait for you to experience your next manifestation and your next dream come true. Thanks for joining me here in the Unlock Lab, and ciao for now.